Last night was pretty fun. Syracuse football was at home in the Dome, and they beat down an FCS opponent in Colgate 66-24. Let's get into your takes about the game.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, and we are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, it's about you. That's right, the fans following Syracuse's 66-24 victory over Colgate. You guys had some thoughts, had some takes, and so we're going to get to them on today's show. And before we get to your takes, this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. So, Syracuse football last night, they took down Colgate 66-24. You guys had some thoughts, some takes, some opinions. Let's get into them right now. I'm going to show them on the screen, but hey, just in case you are listening on your favorite audio platform, I'll read them out loud as well. Let's start with Glenn here. What I like the best about Syracuse at this tenure is improvement moving forward. Noticed improvement last year, but we seem to be more dependent on how Kyle was playing, especially after a bye. Hopefully, we won't have that problem this year and go as injury-free as possible. I think there are two ways to look at this comment, and thank you so much, Glenn, for chiming in here. Syracuse, actually this year, performed better against their FCS opponent in Colgate than they did against their FCS opponent last year in Holy Cross. Last night at the half, Syracuse football went up 38-3, and then they won the game, obviously, as you can see if you're watching on YouTube, 66-24. Last year against Holy Cross, they were only up 28-14 at the half. It was a three-score game in the fourth quarter, and Syracuse only won the game 42-14. However, I'm not going to lie and say, oh, I think Syracuse football looks significantly better this season because they just beat down Colgate. And I kind of alluded to that last night on the podcast where I wasn't going to overreact to all the positives that we saw, and there were plenty of positives that we saw, but I also was not going to overreact to some of the negatives that we saw. I was not expecting Syracuse to go out there and play a perfect game against Colgate, and Syracuse last year was not perfect against Holy Cross. They were worse against Holy Cross than they were this year against Colgate. So my biggest takeaway as far as really the improvement side of things is not much. I don't know if this team has gotten better just because they beat down Colgate, but what I will say is they did handle their business, which is all you can really ask them to do. They handled their business. They gave us no reason to worry. As soon as this game kicked off, they force a punt, they drive down the field, they score a touchdown, then they get an interception. But then Will Nixon fumbles. But to the defense's credit, with a little bit of luck, which we'll mention later on the show, they force a field goal. And from then on, when it was 7-3, it was touchdown, punt, touchdown, punt, touchdown, punt, touchdown, punt. You get the idea by now. It was total domination by Syracuse once it was 7-3. But remember, in 2023, Syracuse opened the season against Colgate, and they won that game 65-0. How'd that year turn out? They end up 6-7, losing in a bowl game. So all you can really ask for in these FCS games is that you beat down your opponent, you get as many players to play as possible, and also you want to be relatively injury-free. Syracuse did have a couple of injuries. Demetrius Weatherspoon went out. Justice Ross Simmons had a finger injury, so we'll monitor those over the course of the week as Syracuse gets ready for Clemson. But thank you so much, Glenn. Let's get to the next one right here, which is from Jeffrey. Hey, let's be real. I love when people start with, hey, let's be real, because I know that they're really going to speak how they feel, okay? I love this. The defense had half the starters in, even from the first quarter, and gave up 3 points. There's a reason why the fourth stringers are fourth stringers and gave up 21 to Colgate. Great game, but I feel like Angeli, referring to Steve Angeli, of course, always throws a few pick-worthy throws. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for the comment there. Let's be real about the defense, actually, for a moment, okay? I am not worried about the Syracuse defense, but it's not in the way that you might think. It's because I have already accepted, Jeffrey, that I don't think that this defense is very good. Now, I could be proven wrong. Trust me, I would love to be proven wrong. I would love for Syracuse to go out next week, play Clemson, and to shut them down and hold them to like 10 points. That would be amazing for Syracuse. I'm rooting for the defense to get a lot better, but I've already accepted that they're not a very good defense. And there was nothing that they really could have done last night against Colgate that would have changed my opinion. They could have played like 2017 Alabama here, and I would have said the same thing. Hey, guys, I know the defense looked really good. I know it was nice to see. Look at all the great plays that they made. We remember what happened against Tennessee. We remember the first half against UConn, but to the defense's credit, they stiffened in the second half. So let's pump the brakes here a little bit about this defense, whether it's good or bad. But I mentioned earlier about the defense getting a little bit of help in the first quarter. When they forced that field goal, when it was 7-3, it was mainly because Colgate had a third down and the receiver just dropped it. It was an easy slant pass. It was right in his hands and he dropped it. Syracuse's defense there got lucky. They forced a field goal though, and they were good for the rest of the first half. As far as Steve Angeli is concerned, that was the last part of your comment there. Steve Angeli last night against Colgate had one turnover-worthy throw, in my opinion. I mean, I have to go look back, I think, at all the throws, but from my memory, it was only one. And it was the very first play of the game where he had some pressure and he just heaved it up in the middle of the field like he's Eli Manning in the 2007 Super Bowl against New England. Except this one was not caught by the helmet of Syracuse alum David Tyree. This one just, thankfully, fell to the turf. That was about it. So I thought Steve Angeli, the stats indicated too, he was pretty much flawless in this performance against Colgate. But to your point, the first two games of the year, we have seen Steve Angeli put the ball in harm's way. He only had one pick against Tennessee, and the pick was actually not his fault. It was just a great play by Tennessee. But that makes up for the fact that there were a few other balls that could have been picked in that game. Same thing with UConn. He did throw a pick. It was his fault he threw the pick. It was a bad throw, bad decision, and he could have had a lot more interceptions in that game. So let's see how he does against Clemson next week. How about that? All right. And also, it's bound to happen. Thankfully, they didn't have to do this last night with Steve Angeli, but having turnover-worthy throws is bound to happen when you're throwing as many times as you are in this Syracuse offense. Kyle McCord often would put the ball in harm's way sometimes. I mean, you're throwing the ball 50 times a game. Sometimes it's going to happen. You're going to have 3 or 4 plays at least where it looks like it might get picked off when you're throwing the ball that much. That's why establishing a run game is very, very important in football, because when you throw, yes, a lot of good can happen, more good often than not with compared to a running game. You're going to get more yards on a throw, but also there's more chance of something going wrong when you throw. It's high risk, high reward versus running. We get the whole picture. Now we're getting dummy down football here, or football 101. All right. All I'm trying to say is Steve Angeli, if he throws the ball 50 times a game, he's going to have some turnover-worthy throws. It's just bound to happen. But coming up here on Locked On Syracuse, we'll continue reacting to your takes. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward, I mean, how about last night with Daryl Gill? I believe he was SportsCenter #1 play on Friday, mossing his defender in the first quarter for a touchdown that put Syracuse up 14-3. That was a crazy good play by Daryl Gill. And when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Let's continue reacting to your takes following Syracuse's 66-24 victory over Colgate last night. And let's get to this one right here. Curious what you think of the fact that Luke Carney went in and not Jakhari Williams. Does that mean that Williams is most likely done with us, or at least just going to be a career backup? That is a great question proposed right there. For those that may have missed it, and I did bring this up in the post-game reaction podcast, but again, you may have missed it. You may not have checked out the game. You may not have checked out the post-game reaction podcast. That is okay, but I do apologize if you've already heard it or you've already seen it when you were watching this game. So Ricky Collins was in for Syracuse football. He's the backup quarterback for the Orange, second string on the depth chart in the fourth quarter of this game. And to this point, it was already past the point where Steve Angeli had come back in the game briefly to lead a touchdown drive. Now Ricky Collins is back in. Syracuse is in the red zone of Colgate. But after a scramble play by Ricky Collins, he loses his helmet. And in college football, if you lose your helmet, you can't just simply put it back on and keep playing. You have to come off the field for one play. So Fran Brown at this point, it would be nuts if he once again put Steve Angeli in the game for the third time. That would be crazy. So instead of turning to Steve Angeli or doing some sort of wildcat or maybe calling a timeout, I think if you call a timeout, you can get your player back on the field. He decides to go with Luke Carney. And Luke Carney, to his credit, he only played that one play, but he did execute a quarterback keeper, and he scored his first career collegiate touchdown. So now, to answer your question after setting it up, I think what it shows us is that Luke Carney is the third string quarterback of Syracuse football. We did not know this to be confirmed before the game, and I don't think it's still technically confirmed right now, but I am very, very confident in saying that Luke Carney is the third string quarterback for Syracuse football. When Syracuse in the past, they've released their depth charts. They've only said two quarterbacks on there. It was Steve Angeli, followed by Ricky Collins. We did not know who the third string guy is. I am 99% sure that it is Luke Carney, which means that Luke Carney is ahead of Jakhari Williams right now on the depth chart. And also the fact that I don't think Jakhari Williams, barring a huge, significant development curve for him, like he just gets significantly better in a short period of time, or there's just a boatload of injuries to Syracuse's quarterback room, which would be terrible. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen. He's likely never going to start for Syracuse football. In that case, he's got two choices, which is nice in this day and age for college football. I think this is what really the good of the transfer portal can be. We talk a lot about the bad of the transfer portal. There's some good that can come out of it too. If Jakhari Williams is never really going to get an opportunity to play at Syracuse, well, he's got a couple of choices. He could decide in the offseason to enter the transfer portal and find a school out there that is willing to make him the starting quarterback so that he can get playing time. And who knows, maybe if he gets a real chance with another program, perhaps he can develop and maybe transfer his way back into the Power Four, right? That could happen. It is not unheard of for quarterbacks to go down a level or go down multiple levels, then transfer back up because they end up succeeding and they do get better because they're getting more playing time. Or Jakhari Williams can say, hey, I like being at Syracuse. I know I'm not getting a lot of playing time, but you know what? I'm happy with the team. I like the coaching staff. And I like my education. At the end of the day, this is college and you do have to worry about getting a degree. So we could just decide to say, you know what? I may get an opportunity. I'll continue working for the opportunity. I may not get an opportunity, but I'm at least going to get this education and I'm going to learn a lot from this coaching staff. And the coaching staff's going to help me with their programs that they have in place get a job after graduation. So he's got options. But I do not think that one of those options is become Syracuse's starting quarterback one day. I think right now with Luke Carney already ahead of him on the depth chart, Steve Angeli's got another year of eligibility. Who knows what's going to happen with Ricky Collins? I don't imagine that Luke Carney is going to transfer after this year. In which case, all it has to be is Angeli comes back for another year. Luke Carney comes back for another year. What's he going to be? The third string next year? He could, or he could decide to leave. Point is, I don't think he'll ever be the starting quarterback of Syracuse football. But that was a good question right there. Let's get to this one right here. This one's fun. No shot at a bowl. Pitt will beat them. NBC. Throw in Duke, and there you go. All right, Mr. Negative. Which is weird for me to say because I have been told and I have seen comments calling me negative at times because I can be negative about Syracuse and I could be negative about other teams that I cheer for. I mean, sometimes you'll hear my ad breaks and you'll hear on the podcast that I'm not exactly optimistic about the New York Jets ever. And I'm also a New York Mets fan. I'm freaking out right now about the New York Mets. I do not think that they're going to make the playoffs. That's another story for another day, though, right? That's a different pod. You can check out Locked On Mets for more info about the New York Mets and the collapse that they are having right now in baseball. But here's the deal. I mean, look, you're not entirely wrong. You're not entirely wrong because we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know how they're going to do. They're playing their full ACC slate coming up, and their one non-ACC game left is against Notre Dame on the road in late November, where it's probably going to be 15 degrees outside. It's going to be freezing cold. They may not make a bowl. It's on the table. Those teams that you all mentioned, that you mentioned right there, Pitt, and let me pull up the comment again, Boston College and Duke, those are all coin flip games. And it's definitely possible that Syracuse flips the coin 3 times and it lands on the wrong side of the coin. They lose all 3. Could happen. But to sit here and say they have no shot at making a bowl, they can't win 4 of their final 9 games of the season to qualify for it, it may not happen. You may turn out right. But I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say, yep, they have no shot at a bowl. I'm not calling them a national contender. They're not a national contender. Do I think they're going to play for an ACC title this year? No, I don't. I think the ceiling for this team is lower than it was last year, and I think the floor is lower than it was last year. But that doesn't mean they can't make a bowl, and it doesn't mean that they have no shot at making a bowl. They can obviously make it. It won't be easy, but they can make it. And I'm saying this as someone who, when I turn on this podcast every single day, you're getting my honest thoughts and you're getting my honest opinions. I cannot promise that I'm going to be right about everything. I'm not going to be right. I'm going to be wrong sometimes. It's bound to happen as a sports fan that you are going to be wrong, including myself. And I'll tell you when I'm wrong. I'll tell you when I'm wrong. If I remember my take, I was dead wrong about Syracuse. If they go 2-10, 3-9, 4-8 this year, even 5-7, I'll say I'm dead wrong. I thought that they could make a bowl. They didn't make a bowl. But I'm not going to sit here and say to you, they have no shot. No shot at a bowl. What do you mean no shot at a bowl? I mean, come on now. Come on. Let's be real, as Jeffrey says, as he commented earlier on in the show. Coming up, more reaction to your takes. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days, or staying focused, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is doctor developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. I've tried a lot of electrolyte powders, but nothing tastes as good or works as fast as Drip Drop. And right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code LockedOnCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LockedOnCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. It's the weekend, and it's time to crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered. Powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most, and let's break it down. And for Syracuse, a lot of players to choose from after their 66-24 victory over Colgate. But I'll go with an obvious one. Steve Angeli, over 400 yards, a gazillion touchdowns. He was sensational for Syracuse football. And just like Steve Angeli delivered for Syracuse, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Let's continue reacting to your takes following Syracuse's victory over Colgate last night. So let's get into this one right here from Paul. I hope we keep this momentum for next week against Clemson. Fascinating comment right there. Same. I hope Syracuse keeps the momentum and they beat Clemson next Saturday on the road. Now, at the time that I am recording this, Clemson is currently losing to Georgia Tech. I do not know what the outcome of the game is by the time you are watching or listening to this podcast, but as of right now, I do know that Clemson is losing. But I stopped watching the game for a little bit to go ahead and record this podcast for you all. Two things here. First, I am a believer in momentum in sports. I know there are some out there that will say momentum in sports is not real. It's not an actual thing. That's not true. That's simply, it's not. Momentum is a real thing in sports because it's all about an athlete's mindset and all about a coach's mindset as well. And when things are going good, it's not that you're immune to bad things happening, but when you have that positive momentum and that positive injury, it's more likely that good things are going to happen, and it works the other way around too. When bad things start happening, bad things start to pile up, mistakes start to happen, all of a sudden, negative momentum comes. And it could spiral because it's a mindset thing. And if you don't believe in momentum, then these guys are not robots out here. They're real human beings. They have emotions, and sometimes they're going to be up, sometimes they're going to be down. And the most important thing you can do as an athlete is to try to stay as level-headed as possible. So that's number one. I am a believer in momentum in sports, and I do hope it continues for next week against Saturday. But here's the deal, though. Clemson is Clemson. This is an entirely different animal than Colgate. How much momentum did Syracuse really gain from dominating Colgate? I don't think they necessarily took a step in either direction. Did they get better? Did they get worse? I mean, we talked about it earlier. Did they improve or did they not? I don't think we can really make that determination from last night. The only determination that we can really make is that Syracuse played an FCS opponent and they handled their business. That's okay. That's good. Golf clap for that. That's what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to go out and dominate Colgate. That's exactly what they did. But I'm not going to sit here and say, well, now you dominated Colgate. You're ready to play Clemson. I mean, you got all this positive momentum heading your way. Not really. We'll find out what happens on Saturday. I don't think you really gain that much momentum by beating a team by a lot just because it's an FCS opponent. Simple as that. Also, I don't really care how this game finishes out between Clemson and Georgia Tech. I really don't. Clemson could lose this game, and they are still the Clemson Tigers to me. This is a team that's still loaded with 4- and 5-star talent across the board. Clemson is also at home for this game. The Orange, by the way, have never won at Clemson. They've never won there in their program history. So Clemson, they have the talent advantage over Syracuse on paper, and they also have home field advantage in a building that Syracuse has never actually won in. It's going to be a really difficult game. And Syracuse is probably going to have to be on its A game in order to beat Clemson, which we'll talk about next week on Locked On Syracuse. But thank you for the comment right there about the momentum, and hopefully it can continue versus Clemson on Saturday. And finally, let's get to this one right here. Time for a new opponent as Colgate is getting old, blowouts every year. First off, I think every team in a power conference is entitled to have at least really only one FCS opponent on their schedule. I think having multiple FCS opponents on the schedule is ridiculous. But everyone should be entitled to one. That's your free win. That's the game where you can have everyone show up in your building and expect to win and see a lot of players. And hey, look at him. Like he was a recruit in the 2025 class. We haven't seen him on the field. And look, now he's on the field, right? Maybe you were someone who wanted to see a guy like Luke Carney play. And hey, look, he played for a play. Pretty cool, right? So I think everyone's entitled to play everyone entitled to play one FCS opponent if you are in a power conference. That's your free win. Take it. As far as Colgate is concerned, Syracuse has only played Colgate 4 times since 2010. It's more of an older rivalry than it is a rivalry now. 4 times since 2010. And yeah, I mean, they've all been blowouts, but that's what's going to happen when you have an FBS team going up against an FCS team. In 2010, it was a 42-7 game. 2016 was 33-7. 2023, we've discussed 65-0. And then last night was 66-24. The good news is that we know Syracuse's full non-conference slate for the 2026 season already. So they're going to play Notre Dame. They're going to, I think, go on the road and play UConn. They got Toledo. And their one FCS opponent that they're going to play is not Colgate. It is New Hampshire next year. So don't worry. They're not playing Colgate next year. They're playing New Hampshire as their FCS opponent. Just like how last year they played Holy Cross. And sometimes they'll play UAlbany as an FCS opponent. Differs every single year, but I think Syracuse every year should definitely play an FCS opponent. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. Comment in the comment section below. Now, as far as what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the near future, tomorrow there will be no podcast, but we will be back on Monday with big picture takeaways following this victory over Colgate and really the first 3 weeks of the season. We are 1/4 of the way through the regular season for Syracuse football, which hopefully will not be only 1/4 of the way through the entire season, because hopefully Syracuse is playing in a 13th game in 2025. So that's coming up on Monday. And then on Tuesday, we start to get ready for Clemson. So all that and more coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the near future. And folks, thank you so much for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen of the day. For your second listen, you have some options. You can check out Locked On ACC for a more broad picture of all things Atlantic Coast Conference. You can also check out Locked On College Football for all things college football. So you can check out all those channels here on the Locked On Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe and tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse. I'll see you all again soon.